Amazing journey revealed. Struggling boy surprises widow with $5,000 payback for her transformation. Jake sat on the edge of his bed in the dim light of their cramped apartment, staring at the tattered box that had been pushed aside for years. Inside, the letters lay silent, whispers of a family he barely knew. Yet now everything seemed amplified. The potential fortune, the lost inheritance, and the weight of responsibilities that had settled onto his young shoulders. Just as he would muster the courage to explore this hidden treasure, a sharper reality broke through: Mrs. Thompson's looming foreclosure. The old woman next door had become a small beacon in his distracting world. At 15, Jake felt invisible, a ghost navigating the hallways of school where economic status outlined social circles. His mind always danced towards science, equations, and discoveries, yet here he was, on the precipice of a dilemma as big as his dreams. The letters could change everything for him, but what about Mrs. Thompson? He remembered her lined, gentle face crumpling in quiet desperation the day she confided about the foreclosure notice. A symbol of all that could go wrong when the world decided to grind its gears against those already down. She'd lost her husband, and with her stories of love, she gave Jake a sense of family he deeply craved. He could no longer think of himself in that moment. Her burdens became his. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Jake gasped at the thought of failing her. The weight of her grief could not be added to his own ambition. He tried to sell his handmade crafts to raise money, the effort relentless, yet fruitless against unexpected expenses. A broken sewing machine, school fees, the rising cost of basic supplies gnawed at his meager savings. Frustration swelled inside him, mixing with determination, but it felt like an unending cycle of hope dashed by harsh realities. Each day, he faced the predatory lender who seemed unfazed by Mrs. Thompson's pain. Frustration turned into anger. He could almost taste the bitterness of injustice. Doubts clouded his mind, pulling him into a spiraling vortex. Was all of this worth the sacrifice? Why couldn't he let the inheritance pave his own route of obscurity? And yet, the thought of abandoning his second mother, the woman who believed in him, crushed his resolve. Jake paced the small space, letters in hand, the walls closing in around him. He felt suffocated by the looming decision. He could use the money to escape his struggles, or he could uphold his loyalty to Mrs. Thompson, whose fragile hope rested heavily in his hands. In the throes of indecision, he could almost hear the letters calling out for him, urging him to confront the family legacy, intertwined with stolen dreams and unshed tears. He stood frozen, knowing that whichever path he chose could reshape their futures and unravel a delicate fabric of sacrifice and love. The daunting choice enveloped him as darkness crept in, the stakes never feeling higher. And just as he found a flicker of courage, the letters were like echoes of a life waiting to be transformed, leaving him standing on the edge of a decision that could forever change his and Mrs. Thompson's lives. Jake's breath hitched as he held the letters, feeling every word imbued with a tension that seemed to vibrate through the air. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of the moment press against him. What had once seemed like a small hope now felt like a heavy burden, pulling him in two conflicting directions. He could almost hear Mrs. Thompson's soft voice urging him to think wisely, to choose compassion over greed. The next morning, Jake woke up to the rhythmic sound of rain tapping against the window. The stillness in the apartment wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. Yet the reality of Mrs. Thompson's predicament loomed in the corners of his mind, gnawing at him. He could not afford to be paralyzed by indecision. He had a plan to devise, one that required both ingenuity and courage. Grabbing a notebook, Jake sketched out his ideas. What if he organized a small sale? He could showcase his crafts and perhaps invite others from the neighborhood to contribute their work. Their collective earnings could bridge the gap for Mrs. Thompson and provide her with a fighting chance. A sense of purpose ignited within him. This path felt more meaningful than merely pocketing funds. He was determined to create something bigger than himself. For the next 2 days, Jake threw himself into this plan, crafting items with meticulous care. He transformed forgotten materials into colorful creations, hand-painted flower pots, unique bookmarks, and intricately designed keychains. Each piece reflected not only his growing skills, but also the love and support Mrs. Thompson had shown him. With every completed item, a flicker of hope ignited. Yet tension rested heavily on his heart. Would it be enough? He would need to gather hearts, not just goods. He decided to pay his neighbors a visit. One evening, he knocked on several doors, presenting his idea to a mix of bewildered and intrigued faces. "I need your help," he articulated, "to support Mrs. Thompson. She's in a tough spot, and I believe together we can make a difference." Some nodded, their initial skepticism slipping as they heard the passion in his voice. Others hesitated, but Jake wouldn't let despair be a barrier. When the skies cleared the following day, he laid out his makeshift market with a childlike hope fluttering in his chest. As townspeople began to gather around him, Jake felt a profound sense of community he had never experienced before. The vibrant colors of handcrafted goods, the laughter of children running about, and the warmth of the shared space transformed his solitary endeavor into something much larger. It was more than a sale, it was a statement of resilience. However, the day was not without its challenges. An unexpected argument broke out amidst the crowd when a neighbor, fueled by jealousy, claimed Jake was simply exploiting the situation. The tension stung, igniting old feelings of insecurity that crept back into Jake's mind. He felt the urge to defend himself fiercely, but what he didn't know was that this could be a turning point in more ways than one. With steely determination, he cleared his throat, addressing the crowd. "This isn't about me," he declared, nervous yet resolute. "It's about supporting someone who deserves to get back what she's lost. We can choose to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down." Jake's voice broke through the commotion, planting seeds of understanding that began to bridge divides. More neighbors voiced their support, aligning with Jake's vision of kindness over conflict. As he witnessed unity blossom around him, it became clear that this moment was not just about raising money for Mrs. Thompson. It was about forging connections where he had felt so alone before. But as the day wore on, with a sense of victory now at his fingertips, Jake could not shake off the feeling that destiny awaited him in that tattered box of letters. The inheritance heirloom was still unclaimed, lurking on the edge of his future. The shadow of that family legacy loomed larger as evening approached. Would he be willing to claim a path laden with personal gain after all he had felt and discovered about the power of collective strength? Beneath the glowing twilight, the deeper questions emerged, compelling him to confront not just the past, but his own emerging identity. The time had come to truly face what lay ahead. Jake sat in the dim light of his living room, the echoes of the day's successes mixing chaotically with the weight of the letters still unopened on the table. Strangely, the triumph of seeing the community gather was overshadowed by the persistent gnawing at his gut, the reminder of a path that had suddenly bifurcated into two distinctly different directions, one veering towards self-interest and the other anchored in altruism. He fiddled with the corners of the envelopes, imagining what his family's history might reveal. A promise of wealth danced temptingly in his mind. However, the sheer thought of abandoning the connection he had fostered with his neighbors, and, more importantly, leaving Mrs. Thompson to face her struggle alone, brought an immediate clash to his conscience. Just a few weeks ago, he had barely felt any sense of belonging, and now he found himself at the heart of a community. How could he reconcile that feeling with a choice that might prioritize his own financial gain? With each glance at Mrs. Thompson's house, he recalled her laughter, the warmth of her words over cups of tea, and the hope she had inspired in him during some of his darkest days. Wasn't that worth more than potential financial comfort? Jake felt himself pulled into an internal dialogue, dissecting every motive he ever clung to. He stood and paced, restlessly musing over the future of his newfound friendships. Impulsively, he grabbed a pen and began writing an open letter, crafting it as if every word would resonate back to him, to himself, and the very core of who he wanted to become. He expressed gratitude, shared his worries, and most importantly, invited everyone, including those initially skeptical, to meet him one last time to discuss how they could continue supporting each other as neighbors. As he finished the letter, a sense of clarity washed over him. He wasn't just a craftsman or a get-rich-quick dreamer seeking to cash in on unearned fortunes. He was part of something essential. It drove him to aspire for authenticity in all things. But as he prepared to send out the letters inviting his neighbors to a gathering, another wave of doubt crashed over him. If there was no meaningful resolution at that meeting, what would it imply for his relationships? They were still merely surface interactions, ephemeral by nature. He refrained from mailing it immediately, instead choosing a quiet pause filled with introspection. What if this gathering turned out to be an apocalyptic failure? He hesitated, thinking of every time he had succumbed to this kind of paralyzing fear, the moments that had inhibited him from stepping fully into his potential. This was different. There was a profound trust that had been built, something he needed to honor. On the day of the gathering, his eyes wandered among the familiar faces, neighbors who had thrown caution to the wind to confront each other's insecurities. It was an uncomfortable energy. Each person was likely battling a personal fear. As he prepared to speak, he could feel every heartbeat echo in the silence. Taking a deep breath, he acknowledged their uncharted territory. This isn't just about a sale or a good deed. It's about crafting a new narrative where we lean on one another, question what it means to be a neighbor and a friend. The reaction was swift. Some nodded in agreement, while others wore expressions of apprehension. Yet the tension in the air didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like fertile ground ready for new growth. Now Jake needed to sow the seeds of his intentions, even if it meant risking rejection or misunderstandings. Then he remembered the letters, the documents that could alter the course of his life. In the density of new emotions, clarity struck. Would the echoes of his family's past drown out the voice of his present community? The answer sat firmly on the tip of his tongue, as did potential resolutions. The moment he stepped off the stage to face his neighbors became a formative one. Destiny loomed over him, yet there was a new urgency bridging the gap between past and present. Filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation, he understood now there would be no turning back. Would he step into a legacy that made him whole, or into one that continued the isolation he once felt? This moment would define the contours of who he would become. As the crowd murmured tentatively, Jake sensed a shift in the air ahead. What truths would be uncovered in the upcoming revelations? Jake stepped down from the makeshift stage, his mind racing, heart pounding. The momentum of his speech lingered like a charged current, an intangible thrill sweeping through him. All eyes were on him, and he felt the weight of their collective anticipation. The vulnerability of baring his soul basked in danger, yet behind that was a burgeoning sense of responsibility. He needed to step up, not just the way he had for Mrs. Thompson, but for every person in that room. In the aftermath of his speech, he felt threads of connection weaving tighter among the group. Familiar faces, people he had previously exchanged merely polite nods with, now bore expressions of cautious hope. But he couldn't lose sight of the challenge that lurked at the back of his mind. The unopened letters waited for him, whispering promises of quick success, urging him to abandon his precarious path toward building community in favor of the safe, sterile comfort of wealth. "Jake," Mrs. Thompson called softly, breaking into his thoughts, her gaze steady on his. "I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but it's important we know how to approach this. What if we don't have the means to support each other?" Her question struck a nerve. He longed to reassure her, but also wondered if he truly had the capacity to lead this group toward real change. "Let's start by being honest about what we have," Jake proposed, a flicker of determination igniting within him. "If we're transparent with one another, we might find solutions we never thought possible." The room swayed in unison as several neighbors exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. They began sharing their own worries and resources, revealing hidden strengths that had been buried under layers of fear and isolation. A retired teacher spoke of tutoring children in need, and a frugal couple shared their knowledge of budgeting and finance. Little by little, ideas rippled through the room like wind through trees, igniting discussions of barter and skill sharing. Jake felt exhilarated as the dynamic shifted. Here was a tapestry being woven together, not from individual gains, but from shared purposes. It was chaotic, but he thrived in the chaos. Doubts flickered within him, but they were overshadowed by newfound conviction. In that moment, he discovered an unexpected skill: facilitating dialogue. His questions, once just a vehicle for his anxieties, became tools for empowerment, driving deeper discussion among neighbors about their personal capacities and aspirations. But just as hope began to blossom, another weight settled heavily on Jake's shoulders. Aside from the letters, he felt another pressing obligation: his personal stake in the matter. What if he found a way to wield this newfound influence over their conversations? Would it lead to tangible results or unravel into a network of disappointment? With a gentle sway of the meeting, he raised his voice again. "I want us to think bigger and bolder. What do we want to achieve together? We can tackle hardships creatively." The inspired chatter that followed only solidified his commitment. As the group split into smaller discussions, Jake lingered on the periphery, his mind racing with questions. His past had shaped him, yet it was within this moment, amid laughter and hesitant hope, that the man he wanted to become was emerging. Conflicted visions flashed before him. The unopened envelopes appeared in stark contrast to the energized faces around him. Wealth could offer comfort, but at the cost of meaningful connections. He envisioned Mrs. Thompson's smile and the life that bloomed when people rallied for one another. And just like that, he was at another crossroads. Could he let go of old notions of success and allow himself to redefine it through the synergy blossoming in that room? The tension hung heavy, each moment pregnant with possibilities. As Jake observed the vibrant discussions unfold, the question tightened around him. What steps would he take next to nurture this new foundation? With that uncertainty looming, he recognized it was time to confront the implications of his family's legacy and confront the contradictions of ambition and community. The revelations were bound to come, but were they the truths he was ready to unveil? As he braced himself for answers, he understood that the seeds of change could only blossom if he dared to dig deeper into his own heart. Would he find the courage to face the truth hidden in those letters? Jake stepped back from the group, the voices swirling around him as if they were caught in a tempest. Every laugh, every bit of encouragement echoed his own internal turmoil. The warmth of connection was palpable, yet a cold knot tightened in his stomach. Was he truly capable of leading this pursuit? The prospect filled him with both determination and dread. He moved toward the corner, fingers brushing against the envelopes tucked away in his coat pocket, each one a reminder of the path that promised easy resolutions. But now he wrestled with something bigger, an emerging self, a vision that reflected back from the smiles of his neighbors, their faces lit with newfound possibilities. The internal dialogue shifted, the letters suddenly feeling like weights instead of opportunities. The decision he faced grew more complex. Wealth could be an anchor or a sail, but which one did he want to choose? "Hey, Jake," a voice broke through his reverie. It was Marco, a brash entrepreneur from the neighborhood. He sauntered over, confidence radiating from him. "That was some speech. You really know how to get people talking. We could use your talent to brainstorm some real solutions here." Jake nodded politely while his mind spun. Marco's enthusiasm was intoxicating, yet he was also a reminder of the temptation of quick fixes. Was he ready to draw on his persuasive skills for profit? "Thanks, Marco, but I think we need to focus on real and lasting connections first," he replied hesitantly, feeling the weight of his words as they hung in the air. "Sure, but solutions take money," Marco pressed, a hint of challenge in his tone. "Attracting investment can bring us what we need. What's wrong with that?" Jake felt the burn of scrutiny, not just from Marco, but from the others nearby, their faces reflecting his unease, as if they were aligning behind him. Perhaps that was the crux of it all, the clash between ambition and authenticity. The allure of monetary gain danced tantalizingly close, taunting him with visions of a brighter future. Yet it was obscured by the shadows of compromised integrity. Shifting his posture, he posed a question that surprised even him. But what if we don't need that to succeed? What if we can leverage our skills instead? Create something that doesn't require external capital? The room quieted as they mulled over his suggestion, tension brewing. He saw a range of reactions, from furrowed brows to thoughtful nods. This was the pivotal moment. Here lay the shift in his leadership journey, a chance to pull himself and them towards authenticity and collaboration. "Think about it," Jake continued. "A community led by its own hands and hearts can be more powerful than any check that can be written." Energy sparked as discussions re-emerged, the room buzzing with ideas of how they could barter services and talents. A sense of shared purpose began to fill the air, wrapping around Jake like a comforting blanket. But with each flicker of hope he ignited, an underlying fear surfaced. Was he asking them to invest in a dream that could shatter? And what if he failed them? Jake took a deep breath, the uncertainty looming larger than before. As the atmosphere transformed again, he noticed Mrs. Thompson's gaze on him, admiration and apprehension mixing in her eyes. It became clear that people were looking to him to provide not just inspiration, but guidance. The mantle of leadership weighed heavy, but he reveled in the challenge, to inspire change, to risk his vulnerability while encouraging theirs. With newfound determination, Jake facilitated the discussions, encouraging creativity and connection. But even in the glow of collaboration, he felt the shadows of the unopened letters creep closer. What lay inside those envelopes was a comfort he could easily turn to, luring him away from the hard path he had chosen. How could he navigate this new equilibrium? As the night deepened and patterns of conversation ebbed and flowed, Jake realized one crucial truth. He couldn't avoid facing those letters any longer. The choice between remaining anchored to the past or sailing forward into the unknown pressed against him. But then, a voice called from the corner, someone mentioning the potential of a neighborhood initiative funded by donations. Jake felt the threads of apprehension unravel slightly, but also another question took root. What if this could become something bigger than money or checks, a new purpose driven by the people themselves? With that thought hanging silently, he knew the real challenge awaited him. The moment had arrived for a confrontation not only with his ambitions, but with the truth behind that unopened correspondence. Would he seize this newfound sense of purpose, or would the allure of old paths lead him astray? Jake's heart raced as he excused himself from the animated discussions swirling around the room. Each step was laden with the weight of indecision, the letters pressing like stones in his pocket. He found a quiet corner, the dim light casting shadows that mirrored his inner conflict. It was time to confront the letters head-on. He retrieved one from his coat, fingers trembling as he broke the seal. The crisp paper felt foreign against his skin, a reminder of the past he wrestled to escape. Yet, within those words lay the comfort of certainty. As he read, snippets of dialogue played back in his mind, reminders of easy solutions offered by investors, the seductive promise of quick success. But at what cost? He envisioned a different kind of growth, a burgeoning community sharing strengths, igniting passion within one another, giving life to an idea that transcended mere monetary gain. But could that vision stand up against the seductive security of what those letters offered? Suddenly, a voice broke his concentration. It was Claire, a woman known for her pragmatic approach to challenges. "Jake, I wanted to talk to you," she said, her brow lined with concern. "Everyone appreciates your ideas for community empowerment, but the hard truth is we're struggling financially. We need funds to kickstart anything meaningful. Are you ready to embrace that? Because believing in people is one thing, but it can't pay bills." The jab struck deep. Jake observed her earnest expression, noting the contrast between her practicality and the emotional fervor he had just rallied moments ago. He hesitated. "I know," he said, "but what if we could cultivate resources ourselves? If we connect our talents, we could thrive and sustain what we create." Claire crossed her arms, skepticism rising like a tide. "You think we can gather enough talent to finance our dreams? It's idealistic, Jake. We need a foundation first, and that means capital." Her words lingered in the air, heavy like a storm cloud. For the first time, Jake felt the tremors of doubt slip into his resolve. The urgency of immediate needs clawed at him. Was he strong enough to ignite change when the folds of reality weighed down their ambitions? "Look," Claire continued, her tone softening, "I'm not against your vision. I want to believe in it. But let's be practical. What has drawn our community together isn't just shared values, but some financial security." He looked back at her, reflecting on the advice. In that moment, Jake understood that passion needed something tangible to flourish, grounded in reality without losing sight of dreams. But as he weighed her perspective against his own, the unopened letters in his pocket pulsed like a beacon of easy escape from this newfound responsibility. Just then, Mrs. Thompson joined them, her gentle presence grounding. "What's the matter, Jake? You look deep in thought." He glanced at Claire, the conversation brewing with tension. "Just grappling with choices," he admitted. "I want to inspire independence, but I keep feeling the pull of solutions that promise quick fixes. It's like I'm standing at a crossroad, and each path leads me away from who I want to be." "You're not alone in this," Mrs. Thompson assured, her voice warm. "We're all navigating uncharted waters. Just remember, sometimes the hardest choice is to build something meaningful with difficulty and turbulence rather than take the easy route." Her wisdom seeped into him, forcing clarity through the fog. Yet as he contemplated the future, he felt a reverse longing for the stability the letters offered. The weight of the conversations, the scrutiny of his peers, each felt like steely chains threatening to bind him. "Maybe it's time to entertain both ideas," Jake said slowly, thinking aloud. "What if we pursue sustainable income while fostering our community's capacities?"
Claire smiled, a hint of respect resurfacing. Now that's a start. You can still fight for your vision while making practical moves. The implications of that thought hung in the air, heavy yet liberating. It exposed the growing ambition within, a desire not just to lead, but to evolve, facing the potential of failure rather than being paralyzed by fear of it. Jake nodded, drawing strength from the flickering lights of possibility around him. Let's outline some steps. If we can secure some small donations alongside our efforts, we might just create the balance we need. Just as he began to envision possibilities, a text buzzed from his pocket, flashing a name that shook him to his core.
The sender's name transported him back. John, the investor who promised fast capital based on potential projects. Now he had to decide. Would he pursue the safety of old alliances, or continue to tread unsteady waters towards his new vision? Jake stared at the screen, realizing this was the moment to confront the ghosts of his past. Would he turn back to the familiar, or step further into the unknown? Jake's pulse quickened as he stared at the name on the screen. John. The promise of immediate support danced like a mirage in his mind. The temptation to simply accept the guaranteed funds gnawed at him, its appeal stark against the uncertainty of his new path. Gritting his teeth, he flipped the phone face down, wrestling the thoughts that spiraled out of control. "Just focus, Jake," he whispered to himself, casting anxious glances around the room. The conversations filled with optimism felt like a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside him. He hadn't come this far to falter now, but the sheer weight of the struggle pressed heavily upon his shoulders. The letters, the dreams, and the reality collided, sending shards of doubt through him. He needed clarity. Stepping outside into the fading light, he breathed deeply, letting the chill of the evening wash over him. The world seemed to expand, the horizon opening up in front of him. With every breath, he considered the balance Claire had suggested. Practical and passionate, he muttered under his breath. But how? The shadows from the street lamps flickered like his own unease, illuminating choices before him. Growing the community's strengths and fostering independence stood on one side, while the allure of an easy fix beckoned from the other. Each path seemed both inviting and treacherous. His mind raced, as if pulling a thread on a tapestry, weaving ideas of collaboration and trusting in one another's capacities. Not just for survival, but for something enduring. What had he learned from the struggles he faced? He had walked these roads of uncertainty and had gained invaluable insights along the way. Yet could he trust others to echo this journey? Thoughts of his father's struggles came to the fore. The man had fought fiercely against the odds, hoping to create something more meaningful than just a paycheck. He believed in building, not just existing, Jake said softly, thinking back to their countless conversations. Jake turned back to the warmth of the room, determination coursing through him. It was time to act, not with impulsive decisions or retreat into passive choices, but with focused intent. He would reach out to Claire and Mrs. Thompson to outline the potential plan. They would brainstorm practical steps to encourage local talents to contribute towards something greater than their current circumstances. As he stepped back inside, he recalled the wise words of Mrs. Thompson: "Build something meaningful with difficulty." The cold reality of his decision to take the path of mutual effort now ignited a fire in him. Meeting Claire's gaze, he felt a flicker of cohesion, understanding that their difference in opinions was not a barrier, but an opportunity to drive forward. "Hey, can we talk?" he motions for Claire, his voice steady. "Sure, what's on your mind?" she replied, surprise mingling with curiosity. "I've been thinking about our approach. What if we start small, identify local skills, and see what we can offer? It might not immediately fill the financial gaps, but it can create a foundation on which to grow something genuine. Can we assemble a plan together?"
Claire's expression shifted. Skepticism transformed into contemplation. With every moment that passed, Jake felt the tension of uncertain stakes roll away, replaced instead with anticipation. Yes, it was messy. Yes, the outcome was unclear. But within that chaos, there might just be an opportunity for real transformation. As they began to sketch out ideas, echoes of uncertainty still lingered in the back of Jake's mind. Yet an undeniable resolve emerged. This was just the beginning of the journey, and with every decision he was growing, evolving into the leader he aspired to be. But while Jake focused inwardly on his plans, a breeze rustled through the door, bringing with it the faint buzz of his phone vibrating against the table. He felt a pulse of adrenaline as he stole a glance, noting with varied emotions the name displayed once more. This time it wasn't just John, it was a message, a proposal that could change everything. Would the message offer a chance to quickly elevate their ambitions, or would it risk unraveling the very fabric he now sought to weave together? Jake hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. The message blinked back at him, bearing the promise of a financial boost, the kind of lifeline that could easily solve pressing problems. Yet a part of him bristled at the idea of quick fixes. The weight of what they were trying to construct hung heavy in the air, intermingling with the mechanized pulse of his phone. Each beep seemed to echo the uncertainty coursing through his mind. He tried to refocus on Claire, who had already begun drafting notes, her pen moving swiftly across the paper. The earnestness in her concentration pulled him back to the task at hand. "Jake," she said, breaking the meditative silence, "what if we structure this differently? Instead of spreading ourselves thin, why not focus our initial efforts on one skill set we know is prevalent in our community?" His focus sharpened. Claire was onto something. They had spent countless evenings discussing the abundance of creativity buried in the individuals around them, yet they had been approaching this without a real strategy. "You might be right," Jake conceded, the gears of his mind turning. "What about artisan skills?"
There's enough talent to create a small market, and it leads back to that sense of community we discussed. Both seemed to lean into the idea, their previous doubts fading as enthusiasm ignited a new pathway forward. They leaned over the drawn-out plan, poring over possibilities. Who in the neighborhood knew how to craft furniture? Which single mother had an eye for creating bespoke jewelry? With each person's talents unfurling, Jake's confidence began to swell. Yet the taunting vibrational hum of his phone persisted, urging him to break from their productive floor of ideas. It was John again, the subject line glimmering with the kind of security Jake once craved. The messages hence blurred into the background, a constellation of choices multiplying like shadows in a dimly lit room. Deep down, he understood he could dismiss it altogether, refocusing instead on this fledgling plan that felt alive, pulsing with potential. As they progressed, Jake felt a swell of pride at how far he'd come from his initial crisis of confidence. The self-recriminating thoughts that had plagued him just days prior began to lift, replaced with a burgeoning sense of purpose. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was strategizing. He was building. Moments later, he turned to Claire, noticing her light spark of excitement. What if we held a workshop, an event where everyone could showcase their crafts and skills? The idea rolled off his tongue before he could second-guess it. Claire's face lit up. Yes, we could charge a small entry fee to cover costs, maybe even include lessons. Jake paused, suddenly overwhelmed. That's when it hit him. The idea was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious. Could he push forward without unraveling the tapestry of relationships and trust they'd started to weave? A part of him hesitated, nervous about the responsibilities that lay beneath such an undertaking, the potential fallout of overreaching. But as he looked at Claire, the determination tied to her hopeful grin reminded him of the resilience he had inherited from his father. "Let's do it," he said, more firmly than he felt. "We'll make a list tonight. The first step is finding those artisans." They returned to their notes, the excitement framing their exchange, yet Jake couldn't shake the underlying tension that simmered beneath the surface. In the back of his mind, John's message loomed larger than life, a gnawing temptation he couldn't fully eradicate. As they worked late into the evening, brainstorming every detail, Jake found himself oscillating between ambition and trepidation. The stakes were rising. He had accepted the challenge, yet the message from John, still unnoticed on the table, brought a chill of reminder. Easy paths had their own allure. The sound of his phone vibrating again jolted him from his thoughts, and he swiveled in the chair, confronted not just with the unfolding narrative of their project, but the weight of decisions still pending, the kind that could peek through the veil of enthusiasm and challenge his growing resolve. What if accepting help from John meant losing what he strove to build? He swallowed hard, dialing into the uncertainty that surrounded the fast-approaching choices, knowing he would need to confront both the external and internal conflicts head-on. The moment was coming when he would have to reconcile the promise of immediate relief with the risk of straying from his true path. Little did he know, the message was about to spark connections that would compel him to face not just John, but the essence of the journey he was desperately crafting. With renewed ambition fueling him, Jake shook off the creeping doubt that accompanied the vibrant excitement from Claire's suggestion. They lingered over the notes, mapping out potential artisans, each name a new thread woven into the fabric of their vision. But just as creativity began to flourish, uncertainty loomed larger. A fleeting shadow whispered words he tried to suppress. What if it all fell apart? "Do you think we have enough to fill a workshop?" Claire asked, casting her eyes back to their list. There was a hint of worry lacing her tone, and it made Jake pause. He recognized that worry. He felt it too. "We need to be realistic about turnout," she pressed. "If we don't get enough people—" He interjected, "But if we don't try, we'll never know. We've got the talent, and we know these people. They're eager to showcase their crafts." His voice was stronger than he felt. The weight of his words pressed against the newfound energy surging within him. Claire nodded slowly, but her expression didn't quite match his momentum. Jake's heart raced. It was this sentimentality that could break the very foundation they were trying to build. He shifted in his chair, weighing his next words carefully. "Let's write a compelling pitch. Something that showcases not just their crafts, but the stories behind them. Personalize it." As they continued their brainstorming, a surprising revelation sparked in Jake's mind. The artisans weren't just cogs in a machine. They were stories. Each name on the list represented a narrative woven into the community's fabric. The thought invigorated him. "If we highlight their journeys, it will resonate," he stated, gesturing to the notes. "It gives people a reason to come. They won't just be supporters, they will become part of the stories." Claire brightened at this angle. "We could create promotional materials that share those narratives, maybe even feature the artisans in short videos leading up to the workshop." As they jotted these ideas down, a powerful realization began to unfurl within Jake. He was not merely out to help others, he was also learning. Every discussion pushed him deeper into understanding what makes a project successful, how marshaling creativity could uplift not only their efforts, but his own growth. But throughout the evening, his mind kept circling back to John. The easy option hovered nearby like an uninvited guest. The notion of a financial safety net teased Jake's anxious tendencies, gnawing at his resolve. In quiet moments, the thought loomed, swaying him like a pendulum, swinging constantly between the allure of quick fixes and the hard-won independence they sought to cultivate. A decisive moment was approaching. He could still salvage the scraps of his old life or seize this nascent opportunity. Each choice he would make from here on out carried weight. The journey of building something authentic was intertwined with how he chose to work through challenges. Jake stood, excitement and concern igniting within him. He needed clarity. "Let's schedule an initial meeting with some artisans, present the workshop idea, see who is interested," he
he suggested, hoping to push past the unease clinging to the edges of his thoughts. Agreed, it's actionable, Claire beamed, her belief in their vision rekindling Jake's own fire. They lit into the night, forging connections that would be pivotal for their ambitions. Yet the question nagged at him. Could he truly avoid the path from John, marked with instant gratification and the ache for stability? Just as he finished outlining a plan for their first meetings, Jake's phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. It was another message from John, flashing across the screen with stark temptation. The time had come to face the true weight of his choices. A decisive juncture lay at hand. Jake took a deep breath, knowing that every decision he made from here on out would shape the kind of man and professional he wished to become. Would he choose the uncertain yet authentic road ahead, or would he veer back to the comfort of conformity? Only a moment of reckoning would reveal what he was truly made of. Jake stood at the crossroads of his life, the unopened letters in one hand and the burgeoning sense of community in the other. His journey of self-discovery had unraveled layers he never knew existed, exposing not only his strengths but also his vulnerabilities. The past had whispered promises of monetary gain, yet the present sang a different tune, one of shared purpose and unity that he had forged among his neighbors. The workshop was set to commence in a matter of weeks, and as he watched the engagement unfold, he felt a swell of confidence. The artisans had eagerly gathered, inspired to showcase their crafts. Their stories began to intermingle, creating a rich tapestry of connection that filled Jake with pride. He recognized now that this wasn't merely about raising funds, it was about cultivating an identity rooted in collaboration.
As the day of the workshop approached, Jake stood before the mirror in his small apartment, admiring the reflection of a young man transformed by experience. Gone were the timid shadows of self-doubt. Instead, a determined spirit radiated confidence and purpose. He had conquered the chaos of fear and emerged with clarity, ready to embrace the uncertain future ahead. The day of the workshop dawned bright and bustling, with local artisans setting up their booths, each corner of the space bursting with vibrant colors and creativity. Jake watched as the neighborhood gathered, their laughter and energy igniting the atmosphere. For the first time, he felt truly embedded within this community, essential and purposeful. As attendees moved from booth to booth, Jake felt a surge of fulfillment. He was no longer the boy who silently suffered through loneliness. Now he was at the helm of a movement that uplifted others. The conversations flowed as stories were shared and connections blossomed right before his eyes. Then, in a remarkable moment of validation, Mrs. Thompson, with her warm presence, approached him with tears glistening in her eyes. "You've created something beautiful here, Jake. You've brought us all together," she said, her voice filled with pride. The sincerity in her words struck a chord within him. This was the recognition he had craved, not just for himself, but for the meaning behind the collective effort. As the event unfolded successfully, friendships solidified, and unique projects sparked from the initial vision. They not only survived, they thrived. Jake came to understand that this journey had, in fact, transformed his perception of success itself. The monetary legacy he had once deemed crucial paled in comparison to the relationships forged and trust cultivated along the way. Caught in the exhilaration of success, Jake was reminded of the unopened letters tucked safely away. They had represented a possible escape route or an invitation to slip back into an isolated existence. Instead, he had emerged as a leader among neighbors, proving to himself that true fulfillment stemmed from the impact he had on others. With a steady resolve, he took the letters and walked toward the nearby park. There, amongst the laughter and chatter of children playing, he tossed the unopened envelopes into the air, watching them scatter and dance in the wind. Each piece drifted away, like remnants of an old life fading into memory. Jake had arrived at a destination far beyond what financial security could offer.
He did not just achieve a sense of belonging, he had established a foundation of purpose that resonated with who he was becoming. The concerns that had once tethered him to insecurities had dissipated, replaced with a genuine sense of pride. He had accomplished more than a mere workshop. He had forged a path defined by connection and community, proving to himself that true success was about lifting others rather than rising above them.
And amidst the joy of that moment, he embraced the new Jake, confident, capable, and committed to leading with heart. This was his moment of triumph. He had transformed ambition into action, and he stood recognized not just as Jake, the struggling boy, but as Jake, the beacon of resilience and change for others. The past was behind him, the future awaited, and in that space of clarity, he knew it was time to forge ahead and craft a legacy on his own terms, one filled with purpose, authenticity, and unwavering support for those around him. Now, it's time for you to take charge of your story. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a difference. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this uplifting conclusion. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of sharing this narrative.